The writer Sam Anderson gained some weight during the pandemic. And he wrote about it in a recent article that I would highly recommend. In the article, he explained how after he gained this weight, he was packing to go on a vacation. And he quickly packed the vacation essentials, throwing a couple pairs of swim trunks, shorts into his suitcase. And then he went on vacation, and he got to his destination, and it was warm. And he got out the shorts that he'd packed, and he put his feet inside of them and pulled them up, and they didn't go past his thighs. So he had to go shopping for new shorts on vacation. So he went to a clothing store, and while he was at the clothing store, he found a pair of black shorts, and he went to the dressing room and tried them on. He didn't like how they looked. And he walked out of the dressing room, and the man who was working at the clothing store must have noticed how sad Sam was, because the man at the clothing store walked up to him and said, "Dude, don't worry about it. I was in the exact same position just 6 months ago." And Sam didn't really want to engage this because he didn't want to act like it was a big deal or even act like he was that disappointed about how his body looked, but he couldn't help it. "Really? How'd you do it?" And this guy told him about an app that he downloaded on his phone called Noom. And I guess this app makes you track everything you do, every bit of exercise, everything you eat, and then it sends you warnings, threats, and commendations when you behave well, kind of bribing you and threatening you like it's your mom and you're 5 years old. So Sam Anderson downloaded this app called Noom, and he did it. He listened to everything the app told him. He felt sad when the app got mad at him. He felt good when the app rewarded him, and he lost his weight. He regained access to all his old clothes. And when his friends would see him, they would compliment him, "Sam, you look great." And everybody was so happy for Sam after Sam lost all this weight. But Sam found that he didn't feel that different. He was still the same old Sam, he thought. But everybody else thought he was so different. It's a funny thing. The desires we have, or the desires that culture has for us, I don't even know if we can disentangle the two things. And it's funny how we feel sometimes after these desires are met. Maybe you lose the weight, but you don't feel that different. Or maybe you get the 20% raise and it looked like a big deal when you were staring at it on paper, but it doesn't really impact your life. Or maybe you get the bigger vacation home, the longer stay, and you think that this will be very nice, but every night in that bigger home, in that bigger bed, you still go to bed and you're haunted by the same things that you couldn't stop thinking about wherever you were before. You still are who you are. It's not like our identities are set in stone, I don't think, but they are formed over long periods of time. So it doesn't seem like we can just change a few things quickly and then dramatically change who we are too. And that's kind of sad. Because all of us, probably, for different reasons, want deliverance. And when it doesn't come, when maybe it feels like it can't come, we feel sad. There's that scene near the end of the movie Shawshank Redemption where the character Brooks, he's an old man, he's been in prison his whole life, and he finally gets out. Deliverance. But when Brooks goes outside to walk down the sidewalk, the cars move too fast, everything is too loud, he doesn't know where to go. When Brooks is at work, he can't bag groceries fast enough. He can't even muster the courage to go pee without asking his boss for permission. He doesn't know what to do. Sometimes I wonder if our imprisonment in this life is so great that deliverance, in a really immediate way, in the sort of way that would seem to deserve the word, maybe it's not really possible. Because even as the Israelites are being delivered out of slavery this morning, it's kind of messy and complicated. This is a great story. It's an uplifting story. It is the model for the civil rights revolution 50 or 60 years ago in our country. But it's also a complicated story. Because it's not like the Israelites are marching in lockstep with Moses. Fred and I were biking to church this morning, and we biked by a man holding a big dog. And he had the leash pulled real tight to keep the dog back, but it almost made it more threatening. What is this dog going to do? And as we biked past this dog, it kind of sprang forward, and it wasn't very close to us, but I wondered what would have happened if that leash wasn't there. And this sort of made me think about the people who were crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge 60 years ago, behind John Lewis in lockstep, as Alabama troops on horses and dogs came to crack open their skulls. They did it. But here in this story, the Israelites have just turned onto a new street, and they go for about a block before they start crying out to Moses. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you are leading us out into the wilderness to die? We would have rather stayed back there than do whatever this new thing you're asking us to do would be. We would have rather died back there. And of course, the Israelites make it out of this jam, and they sing a song of triumph with the tambourines, and then they walk a few more days, and they can't find food or water. So they cry out again. If only we were still back in Egypt when we used to sit near those flesh pots and we could eat all the bread we wanted, but you have brought us out into the wilderness, Moses, to die of hunger. And they get some bread and water, and they make it out of this jam, and then they cry some more and repeat. Deliverance. This doesn't seem like deliverance, does it? What is deliverance? What does it feel like? Well, our church is growing a little bit. We've got more people in worship, sometimes 60 or 70. I don't know how many we have this morning. It's a little thinner, but it's more fun to have more people in worship. A lot more fun to have 60 people than 30 people. There's energy here, and you can feel it. Coffee hour is lively, and it goes on and on and on. Deliverance? Maybe. But things can still be hard. There's still grumbling, still unhappiness. People probably still talk. I'm certain that I make mistakes. I'm certain that I upset some of you sometime. And you upset one another. And this is hard. And we talk about it. And it's hard. And even while really good things are going on, it might not feel quite like deliverance. So what is deliverance? How about the Civil Rights Revolution, or the plight of black Americans? 400 years ago, great big boats went to Africa and kidnapped people. They brought them here, put them in chains, and beneath the whip, these people toiled under slavery. 250 years ago, there was a war and an Emancipation Proclamation. Freedom, some attempts at Reconstruction, and then vicious Jim Crow laws. And in the minds of everyone, this differentiation or segmentation or racism or whatever you want to call it, but it's in our minds. And then there was the Civil Rights Revolution 50 or 60 years ago, and this seemingly made things more fair. People could sit at Woolworths and have a hamburger drink from the same fountain, go to the same schools, maybe get a mortgage. But still, in the year 2022, the average median income of a black household is about $24,000. The average median income of a white household is about $188,000. 7 times as much. What is the difference between these people? How can such differences exist regarding education or incarceration or health care? So there was a civil rights revolution 60 years ago, but it might not feel like we have achieved deliverance. So what is deliverance if 13% of the U.S. population still lags behind in these sort of metrics? What is deliverance if, even in our lives, maybe comfortable lives in Excelsior, surrounding suburbs, life is still hard? We still go to bed haunted by things. None of us are enslaved, but life is hard nonetheless. What is deliverance? And what is deliverance when the Israelites are escaping Egypt, but still groaning and crying, "Why didn't you just let us die back in Egypt?" What is deliverance? Well, our story today is about a military campaign, and it ends with one side drowning. And if you're a cushy person like me who likes to focus on the love of God, all you need is love, you might not really like this story or these aspects of the story. How God is hardening the hearts of the Egyptians to show his great power. You might not like the parts about the Israelites singing and dancing as the corpses of the Egyptians float to the top of the water. It's a scary story, and I wonder how it might be handled. I wonder if it could contribute to the sort of tribalism that already is running rampant through our country. I wonder if people could read this story and imagine God on their side and rejoice as the corpses of another political party float on the water. I wonder how this story could be abused, how we might read this story, which is about a tiny wandering community somewhere in the Middle East thousands of years ago, and assume that there is some direct application to the powers that be in America in 2022. I wonder about what damage this story could do and think maybe we shouldn't tell it. I didn't get too explicit with the kids about what happens to whomever is trying to chase them to Sunday school. It's a scary story. Maybe we shouldn't look too closely at it. But what about the sharp edges? Is there something for us here? Joe said the most beautiful words, reading from the text. The Lord will fight for you, and you only have to keep still. The Lord will fight for you, and you only have to keep still. We have a God who fights. But of course, this fighting does not happen on behalf of any earthly kingdom. This fighting is not on behalf of the chariots, the tanks, or the B-52 bombers. You can think about that if you ever see people enjoying a military parade. God would just drown all of that. But we have a God who fights. A God who fights. We can't lose that from this story. We have a God who fights for people who are enslaved, people who are imprisoned, people who are stuck in bodies that do not work the way they wish they worked, people who are stuck in bad relationships, people who are stuck in bad churches. We have a God who fights for people like this, but the odd thing is that the outcome of God's advocacy, fighting on your behalf, might not look a whole lot like deliverance. Because the people for whom God fights may still be behind. They may still grumble. They may still complain. Their bodies may still ache. But God will still be fighting for them, for you. God will still be fighting for you. It's an ongoing process. I had a classmate in divinity school. He was an interesting guy, a very neat dresser, kind of wore wild and exotic clothes. Up and down his arms, on his skin, he had the most beautiful designs painted. He didn't always do all his homework. Sometimes you would see him in the quad, sitting in an Adirondack chair, looking up at the trees, maybe writing poetry or something. He didn't always do all his homework, but he had the most beautiful mind. And he was able to capture thoughts and express ideas that other people could not. And so he got into degree programs that other people could not. And my last semester at the divinity school, I took a class with him on Jacques Derrida and French deconstruction. And I don't remember anything about the class or French deconstruction, aside from the names of the people who wrote the books that I supposedly read. But my friend was in this class, and he was there every day. But some days he looked very rough. And I remember one day having a conversation with him, and him saying something to the effect of, "Last night was a very hard night." And however you are able to piece together clues, it suddenly became evident to me that this was someone who was struggling mightily with substance abuse. And throughout the rest of the semester, he came to class every day. And some days he looked like hell. But he was there every day. And just seeing him there every day, this seemed more spectacular to me than any degree he would ever get, any accolades he would ever receive for whatever papers he would ever write, or whatever ideas he would ever come up with. He was just coming every day. And as I looked at him, I thought, God is fighting for you. Maybe this is what deliverance looks like. Thanks be to God.